Alright, it's time for another one. This one's also aimed at a younger audience, but at least this one is feature length. The Muppet Christmas Carol. Now, The Muppet Christmas Carol was directed by Brian Henson, son of Jim Henson, Muppet creator extraordinaire. He unfortunately passed away before this movie got into production, which makes this the first Muppet movie to not have Jim Henson involved. Now we have his son, Brian Henson, stepping up to lead the company. But we still got Muppet mainstays like Frank Oz, Dave Goelz, along with Jerry Jewell and Paul Williams, who were very instrumental in the music for the Muppets and bring their talents to this movie. And this movie is actually pretty fantastic, not just as a Christmas Carol movie, but as a production in and of itself, trying to tell this story with Muppets. Now, last week we talked about how great a job Disney did it with Mickey, Donald, and Goofy and other colorful characters from the Disney universe, but here it's the Muppets, and that brings its own challenges to this kind of production. For one, it's not animated, it's live action, so it has all the regular expectations of a live action adaptation of A Christmas Carol, which we've had many over the years. But now we've got Michael Caine's Ebenezer Scrooge talking to glorified sock puppets for a couple hours, and that could misfire drastically, where you wouldn't be able to take anything seriously. It would just become a farce of itself. But thankfully, this movie does not do that, and a lot of the credit has to go to Michael Caine as Scrooge. Now, Michael Caine is a phenomenal actor, and it's really evident here because he's asked to do a lot. He's one of the few human characters in this whole production. The only ones I can really think of off the top of my head that are human are his nephew Fred and his long-lost love Belle, who we meet in the Ghost of Christmas Past segment. But pretty much everybody else is a Muppet. So Michael Caine had to make a choice. He could either wink at the camera and not take it too seriously, or he could play it 100% straight, like he's in London's theater, playing in front of the Queen of England herself. And that is how he handles his performance through most of this movie. Now, there are some moments where he could have used a little bit more direction, like that silly dance that he does in The Ghost of Christmas Present, or, you know, one or two line deliveries that are a little odd, a little off, a little maybe too theatrical. But those moments are pretty few and far between and actually do offer a bit of levity in what is a surprisingly somber story. This movie, while it is still Muppets and there are still lots of jokes and lots of references and lots of comedic moments, it really sits in those somber moments like any good version of A Christmas Carol should do. And Michael Caine's performance really carries you through all that, because you could see Kermit the Frog as Bob Cratchit try to act sad and kind of sniffle about the loss of Tiny Tim, but ultimately you're watching a sock puppet that's being puppeteered fantastically well, and there's a lot of craft in that, but that's still just a Muppet. If you didn't have Michael Caine standing right beside him, grieving alongside him with real tears, real human emotion that you can reflect back on Kermit, it wouldn't resonate nearly as well. It would become that kind of farcical telling that you would expect from a section of The Muppet Show, for instance, where they did these farcical takes on different stories. No, this version plays it incredibly straight. When Tiny Tim dies, you feel that loss from everybody involved, and that moment in particular is made even more weighty because everybody on the production has just grieved the loss of Jim Henson, their leader, their entrepreneur, the mind behind the Muppets. He had died in a very untimely way, so when they're talking about meetings and partings and the first parting amongst us, it's not that much of a stretch to assume that a lot of the feelings that the writers and everybody was feeling with regards to Jim is being brought out in this dialogue for Tiny Tim. That just makes these dramatic moments hit even harder when you have that real world tragedy to pull from. But that's not to say this movie is a slog or it's too dark or depressing or the Muppets aren't fun, because the Muppets do have a lot of good moments in here. One of the moments early on that make me laugh pretty hard is the Marley and Marley song, and when you see the two old guys as the Marley brothers, which in the original story was only one Marley. Here they had to make it two, because it would be weird if you had Statler without Waldorf, so you gotta keep them together. So I understand that tweet. But that section and their song when they're talking to Scrooge about how they don't want him to end up like the way they are, and they just start riffing off of each other in their classic Statler Waldorf kind of way. It's so funny because the humor offsets the tragedy of the moment, so you really want to laugh, but the actual jokes they're telling aren't good. They're not good or clever jokes, which normally I'd criticize. I'd be like, oh man, why aren't those jokes landing? But because it is Statler and Waldorf and they're always criticizing other people's comedy, to have them just yucking it up with each other, laughing at each other's really dumb jokes, feels weirdly in character for them. And so I do kind of give it a pass. But now I think about most of the best jokes in this movie are from the casting of these various characters. Kermit's got a really heavy role to play as Bob Cratchit, and Kermit brings a lot of weight and moral center to this movie, but he's still got a few good lines that are very Kermit the Frog and very Bob Cratchit at the same time. Kind of like in Mickey's Christmas Carol, when Mickey was both Mickey Mouse and Bob Cratchit, they were just so interconnected. It's the same thing with Kermit the Frog here, and likewise with the Marley Brothers, and especially with Fozziwig, which I'm pretty sure this movie got greenlit just for the use of that pun alone. Which that's just a great joke, not just because of the pun, but because the character of Fozzie Bear matches Fezziwig so well. He's kind of a clown, he's kind of a goofball, and that idea that they switched out his wife with his ma, bringing in Ma Bear, just feels so natural in a way that only the Muppets can deliver on. And they deliver on all the best jokes in this Fozziwig section. You got Electric Mayhem playing the band. And one of the saddest jokes in that section is when you see Animal just hitting this really dinky triangle, just trying to keep his life together when everybody's doing this very posh British dance. And he's just hitting that triangle, and then his spirit breaks and he just has to let it out, and he goes to do the classic Animal stuff. But for me, him letting loose is not nearly as funny as the image of him needing to control himself on this triangle. It's just so funny when you know how much he hates having to stay in control like that. But an interesting choice, none of the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future are identifiable Muppet characters. Which the first time I saw this movie when I was a kid, I thought it was a real cop-out because, okay, we're just getting the same stock Christmas past, present, future characters that we've seen in every version. You have the Jolly Green Giant of Christmas Present, looks kind of like Santa Claus, but he's a Muppety version. And the same thing goes to Christmas Future. He's the hooded cloak, no face, just with a pointing finger, and doesn't really talk, so it's the same thing you've seen before. Now, the Ghost of Christmas Past is a bit different because in every version, the Ghost of Christmas Past usually has the most variety as far as adaptation and interpretation, because the way he's described in the book is incredibly confusing and vague and really hard to pin down. But when you're adapting it into a film, that's really hard to show visually. And this version opts for a kind of uncanny valley, childlike, angelic, wispy, floaty figure. And even though this interpretation doesn't exactly match the book's description in the particulars, it does touch on something that I haven't seen really any other version of A Christmas Carol show with the Ghost of Christmas Past, and that's the description of when you look at it, it's like you're looking through this kind of ethereal lens that's kind of hazy, like there's a film over it, that it's like this optical illusion. And this version does give us that, probably just by virtue of the special effects and green screen and compositing required to make this floaty apparition look the way it does. It does look like you're looking at it through a haze, through a film. It's not entirely clear what it is you're even looking at first. So I do give the movie points on that, but that still doesn't shake this feeling of what a missed opportunity it was to get some more iconic and memorable Muppet characters to play these roles. But then the more I think about it, I understand why they went with the direction that they did. Because on the one hand, while there is great comedic possibility with having, say, Gonzo be the Ghost of Christmas Future with his nose sticking out of the hood, I mean, that image just makes me laugh just thinking about it. But it would seriously undercut some of the dramatic moments that this movie is clearly going for in adapting A Christmas Carol. This is an incredibly faithful adaptation, all things considered. It hits on all the points that you'd expect from a theatrical Christmas Carol. You see the Cratchit family, you see Fred, his family, you see a young Scrooge, you see a young man Scrooge, you see Belle, and you see the cemetery, the tombstone, the bed curtains, and all that. So it hits all the points, and I feel like if Michael Caine didn't have someone fairly grounded in the tradition of A Christmas Carol to bounce off of those more serious moments in past, present, and future when they do come around, I don't think Michael Caine would be able to give as good a performance if he had Gonzo's nose or Sweetums or who knows what else looking back at him while he's delivering these incredibly emotional lines. So even though the originality with regards to these ghosts did leave some to be desired, I do still appreciate the attention to detail and attention to storytelling that this version has, because it does play as A Christmas Carol and it has all the emotional beats. Every emotion that you're supposed to feel in any given scene, you feel. And when Scrooge is reformed at the end, you feel the joy and optimism that just permeates that whole community. And while I see Mickey's A Christmas Carol as the perfect introduction to a very young kid, this story maybe kindergarten or elementary school age, this one I see as the next step. If they really like the Mickey one, maybe show them this this one when they're a little bit older. Maybe they're a little bit more ready for some of the heavier scenes that kind of get glossed over in the Mickey version, also retaining that classic Muppet sense of humor that's just perfect for the whole family. Now I turn it over to you guys. What do you think about the Muppet Christmas Carol? Is it one of your favorites? Was this one your introduction to the Christmas Carol story as a kid? I feel like for most people it's either the Muppets or the Mickey one or the other. But whatever you think, let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. As always, I'm Colby. This is my Nerdy Talk, and I'll see you in the next video.